The first call came from a woman named Marjorie Hale. She claimed to have dreamed of standing beside a lake she had never visited, watching a lantern drift slowly across the surface until it sank without sound. When asked why she called the sheriff's office instead of a doctor, she said, "Because I wasn't alone in the dream." By morning, 4 other residents of Stillwater County had reported the same thing. None of them knew each other. Deputy Mara Ellison logged the first reports on June 3, 1982. At first, she filed them under psychological disturbance until she noticed the timestamps. Every dream began precisely at 7:03 p.m. Each witness described the same still air, the same sound, a faint click like a camera shutter underwater. Meteorological records from that night listed the weather as windless, zero surface motion. The lake, according to the report, was perfectly reflective. 3 days later, local therapist Dr. Elise Waverly reached out to authorities. She had 3 patients describing identical scenes, not just the lake, but the taste of salt, the smell of gasoline, and the sensation of standing ankle-deep in cold mud. She said she was recording her sessions for evidence. The final tape ends mid-sentence after the words, "I think they've started dreaming about me now." Within a week, all 7 witnesses forgot their original dreams, but they began recounting a new one, this time from a different perspective. They saw a woman standing in the shallows holding a recorder, whispering into the dark. Deputy Ellison reviewed the transcripts and added a single handwritten note to the file. "Dreams don't spread unless something wants them to." This recording is part of an internal review conducted by the Stillwater County Sheriff's Department, June 1982. The case file was labeled Unverified Psychological Incident, Multiple Witnesses. What follows is a reconstruction assembled from police notes, audio transcripts, and psychiatric reports recovered from the home of Dr. Elise Waverly. There is no conclusive evidence of a crime, no missing persons, no physical connection between those involved, only shared details, smells, sounds, and sensations described with identical precision by people who had never met. The material has been digitized for clarity, but no sound has been altered. Several sections contain interference, background tones, reversed speech, and overlapping voices that were not present in the original interviews. Investigators attributed this to degradation of magnetic tape. The file was never officially closed. The official summary simply reads, "If these memories did not belong to them, who recorded them?" Deputy Mara Ellison arrived at the sheriff's office before sunrise. The phones were already ringing, 5 separate calls, all from different addresses, all reporting the same thing, a dream. It wasn't standard protocol, but dispatch insisted she take a statement. The first woman on the list, Marjorie Hale, was shaking when Mara arrived, still wearing her nightgown. She kept saying she could feel the dream on her skin, like lake water that wouldn't dry. Marjorie described standing at the edge of a lake she'd never seen, watching something float toward her, a lantern, faint and steady, until it disappeared under the surface. She said the sound it made wasn't a splash, but a swallow. Her husband confirmed she had woken up gasping, soaked in sweat, and smelling faintly of smoke. When Mara asked if she had been to Mirror Lake before, Marjorie shook her head and said, "No, but I could draw it if you want." By noon, there were 4 more witnesses, each from a different neighborhood, each describing the same setting, same lantern, same silence. One man, a local mechanic named Brian Lutz, added something new. He said there had been someone behind him in the dream, standing close enough that he could hear breathing over his shoulder. He didn't look back. Mara compiled the statements in chronological order. Every dream began at exactly 7:03 p.m. She checked weather records. No storms, no seismic activity, no power outages. The official entry for that night listed the wind speed as 0. It was the same eerie phrasing she'd seen once before, in a report from another county, Marlow, years back. She moved past it. That evening, she drove to Mirror Lake. The road was unpaved and half flooded from spring melt. When she stepped out of the car, the air had no movement. No insects, no birds, no sound except the faint tick of her engine cooling. The water was perfectly smooth, catching the reflection of the trees in a way that made them look suspended, as if the world above was trying to remember itself. Mara stood there longer than she meant to. The reflection didn't shift when she did. Her radio crackled softly, static, then silence. She reached for the dial, and in the faint hum beneath the interference, she could have sworn she heard her own name. Not called, just spoken, like someone repeating it to make sure they'd remembered it right. She turned off the radio, wrote down the time, 7:03 p.m. The surface of the lake twitched once, like a breath. Then it was still again. When she returned to her car, the hood was wet, as if it had been raining, but the sky was empty. Back at the station, she listened again to the witness recordings. In Marjorie's testimony, she caught something she hadn't noticed before. A faint background noise, barely audible beneath the woman's voice. It wasn't static. It was water. Slow, rhythmic, and close. Mara paused the tape. The sound didn't stop. Dr. Elise Waverly kept her office on the second floor of the old courthouse building, above the clerk's archive room. She had been practicing in Stillwater County for 12 years, mostly treating sleep disorders and trauma. When Deputy Ellison first met her, the woman was calm, clinical, the kind of person who made silence feel safe. She handed Mara a stack of cassette tapes labeled with initials and dates. "Same dream," she said. 3 patients, no relation. The first tape clicked softly, followed by a woman's voice, young, tired, steady. She described standing by a lake, watching light move under the surface, hearing someone whisper, "Stay still." The second patient, recorded 3 days later, described the same scene but added one new detail. "There was someone else's breath in my mouth." When Mara asked Waverly if the patients could have influenced each other, she shook her head. "They don't know each other, but the dreams are starting to add details that weren't there before. It's evolving." Mara leaned back, listening as the third tape began. A man's voice this time, older, raspier. He spoke of trees that looked too perfect in the reflection, and a voice asking who I am before I say my name. He paused midway and whispered, "I think the lake is trying to remember us." When the recording stopped, the reel spun for several seconds before clicking to a halt, like the tape itself was catching its breath. Waverly said she had started having trouble sleeping after that. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the click of a recorder starting up. She kept one beside her bed to capture what she called residual audio. On the morning of June 9th, she brought that tape to the station. When Mara played it back, there was no voice, no breathing, no ambient noise, only a faint pulsing sound like a heart heard through water. The 2 women sat in silence, watching the reels turn. Then, out of nowhere, the hum deepened, just once, enough to make the desk vibrate. The tape recorder wasn't plugged in. Waverly stared at it, not blinking. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "I think the lake wants to speak. It just doesn't have a mouth." Later that evening, Mara logged her notes. She marked the phenomena as psychological contagion with auditory hallucination. But she didn't believe it. Every witness described a detail that appeared on a previous tape, details that hadn't been made public. Someone, or something, was passing them along, like memories being copied and rewritten. At midnight, she tried playing one of the tapes again before heading home. The hum was gone. But when she fast-forwarded to the end, there was a faint voice that hadn't been there earlier. It wasn't Waverly. It wasn't any of the patients. It was her own, calm, distant, and whispering just one phrase. You're listening to this again. Mara Ellison returned to Mirror Lake 3 nights later. The sheriff's department had received more reports, not dreams this time, but sounds. Neighbors claimed to hear someone talking by the water after midnight, repeating phrases that matched the recordings from Dr. Waverly's tapes. The lake had become a speaker, and the county, its audience. The shoreline was colder than before. Her flashlight beam cut through the mist, landing on ripples that appeared and vanished without movement of air. The stillness made her jaw tighten. Not fear exactly, but pressure, like her body was rejecting the quiet. She started her recorder, time-stamped it, and spoke softly. Field observation, Mirror Lake, 11:47 p.m. Temperature, 42 degrees. No wind. For a few minutes there was only the hum of the recorder. Then, faintly, a second voice slipped beneath her own playback, low, drawn out, distorted by water. It repeated her words half a beat behind her, as if the lake itself was learning her rhythm. She turned off the device, but the echo kept going for one last phrase. No wind. Back at the station, she replayed the audio. The mimicry was perfect. Tone, cadence, even the breath between words. She called Waverly to confirm what she was hearing, but the line clicked twice and filled with the same watery hum. Through it came a whisper, almost playful. "You're not recording anymore." Then the call ended. She filed an incident report, though she couldn't bring herself to label it as paranormal. Instead, she wrote anomalous auditory feedback, but as she typed, she noticed something wrong in her reflection on the window pane. Her mouth wasn't moving when she spoke. The reflection was still finishing the previous sentence, just a fraction behind, eyes blinking slower than hers. She turned away, shutting the blinds. At dawn, she met with Dr. Waverly again. The therapist looked exhausted, her hands trembling from caffeine and lack of sleep. "I think the dreams were never dreams," she said. "They're the lake remembering, through us." She handed Mara a new tape unmarked. "I didn't record this one. It was already inside the machine." When Mara played it, she heard footsteps, breathing, and then her own voice asking a question she hadn't yet spoken aloud. "How long has it been watching?" The tape clicked. Silence. Then another sound, the faint lapping of water against the recorder's mic, though neither woman had taken it outside. That night, the reports doubled. People across the county started describing mirrors that fogged without reason, reflections that blinked slower than they did. A man from Stillwater's northern edge swore he saw himself in his bathroom mirror turn away before he did, and whisper something that sounded like, "Don't look again." Mara sat alone at her desk, listening to the lake's hum play through the police radio. She tried to turn the volume down, but the dial didn't respond. Her own voice came through the static, calm, measured. "You shouldn't have listened." The first call came at 9:41 p.m. A night shift dispatcher reported that every answering machine in the county jail had turned on by itself. No one had pressed record. Still, each red light blinked in rhythm, one after another, as if passing along a signal. When the tapes were played back, they contained no voices, only the sound of distant water, slow and deliberate, like something breathing just below the surface. By 10:15, the same was happening at the local radio station. The host of the overnight show, a man named Ray Collins, left his microphone open and fled the booth. Listeners later reported that the broadcast continued for nearly 40 minutes after he was gone. No ads, no music, just static and an occasional whisper that repeated the same question. "Who remembers you when you stop speaking?" Deputy Ellison drove through the empty streets of Stillwater, her cruiser's headlights cutting through fog that hadn't been forecast. The power grid pulsed on and off in slow intervals, not a blackout, but something more rhythmic. like a city breathing in time with an unseen pulse. Her radio was filled with whispers that never quite formed words. She recognized fragments of sentences from her own reports. Her voice rearranged. She reached the courthouse building where Dr. Waverly's office stood. Every tape recorder inside the archive room was running. Nearly 50 machines, turning their reels in perfect unison. The sound was hypnotic, a synchronized whir that seemed almost alive. In the center of the floor, Waverly stood motionless, holding a reel of tape between her fingers. "It's not recording," she said. "It's remembering." The lights flickered. The air felt charged, thick. The walls began to hum, a low vibration that built into something like a chorus. Every machine in the building started playing back at once. Different voices, overlapping, some laughing, some crying, but all following the same rhythm. 3 seconds on, 1 second off. Mara shouted Waverly's name, but her voice was swallowed by the noise. One of the tapes near Mara's feet snapped free of its spool, the film spilling across the floor in dark ribbons. As it uncoiled, she saw faint impressions on the magnetic strip. Not sound waves, but shapes. Faces pressed into the tape like fingerprints on glass. Each one had eyes closed, mouths half open as if mid-breath. Then the sound stopped. All at once. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was heavier, more complete. Waverly was gone. Her chair was still spinning, slow, patient. On the table, a single reel kept turning even though the tape had finished. Round and round, the same dry whisper scraping through the speakers. "We can hear you now." Mara backed away, heart pounding. Her reflection in the window blinked, a half second too late. She switched off her flashlight, watching the faint glow of the machines in the dark. Then one of them spoke, her own voice, calm and flat. "You left it playing." When dawn came, the courthouse was silent again. The recordings had all stopped. Every file, every reel, every log, blank. But when Mara pressed play on her personal recorder, the first sound wasn't her voice. It was water. And beneath it, something that almost sounded like breathing her name. When Deputy Mara Ellison reached Mirror Lake again, the water was already glowing. Not bright, just a faint silver pulse, like moonlight trapped beneath the surface. The fog around the shoreline seemed to breathe with it, inhaling and exhaling in rhythm. The air was colder than the night should have allowed, and every sound, her steps, her breath, the crunch of gravel, came back with a soft delay, as though the world were listening before answering. She set her flashlight down, pointing it toward the lake. The beam didn't reflect, it sank. Tiny ripples spiraled outward, shimmering with faint faces that appeared for half a second, then vanished before they could finish forming. She whispered into her recorder, but her voice was gone. The machine's red light blinked, yet the tape refused to catch her words. It only caught the water, and something beneath it. Then from the opposite shore, a lantern floated into view. It moved without wind, drifting in a straight line toward her. The same kind every witness had described. She watched, frozen, as it approached the shallows and stopped, rocking slightly, not from current, but as if it were waiting for permission. For a moment, the reflection in the water shifted. Her face looked back, expressionless. Then it smiled. The surface rippled once, and the glow beneath the water grew stronger. Shapes began to rise, pale and incomplete, like silhouettes remembered by someone who had forgotten what humans looked like. Hands reached upward. Too many. Overlapping, transparent. The air hummed. Mara felt her chest tighten, her pulse sinking to the rhythm again. 3 seconds on, 1 second off. She realized the sound wasn't in her ears anymore. It was inside her. Her flashlight flickered and died. In the dark, the glow of the lake became the only light. She saw faces now, dozens of them, forming beneath the surface, some old, some young, all whispering words she couldn't understand. When she stepped closer, they moved with her. Not toward her, but as her, every motion mirrored half a second late. The water was remembering her, learning her shape. The tape recorder at her hip clicked on by itself. Her own voice began to play, slow and wrong. "You came back." The sound layered upon itself, each repetition overlapping until it became a single, endless tone. Her reflection lifted a hand to the surface. She didn't, and still the water rippled under her fingertips. She tried to step back, but her feet sank into the wet soil, heavy, unwilling. The reflection tilted its head, studying her, lips moving without sound. Then the lantern extinguished. Darkness fell so completely that even the stars seemed to fade from above. The only light left came from beneath the surface. A soft silver glow outlining 5 silhouettes, seated around something that shimmered like a table. Mara's recorder caught the final sound at 7:03 p.m. It wasn't water, it was cutlery, gentle, rhythmic, precise. Then one last voice, calm and near. "Now we remember." The Stillwater County Sheriff's Department closed its investigation on June 14, 1982. The report listed no fatalities, no missing persons, and no criminal activity. The official cause for the disturbances around Mirror Lake was described as electrical interference compounded by atmospheric reflection. No photographs were attached. No evidence was logged. The document was signed by Deputy Mara Ellison. 3 weeks later, that same file was found in the department's burn pile behind the station. Half charred, no signature. Inside, the summary page was blank, except for one handwritten note at the bottom margin. Recording stopped at 7:03. County maintenance crews drained part of Mirror Lake later that summer to inspect the power lines rumored to run beneath it. They found nothing mechanical, no cables, no debris. But the soil samples taken from the lake bed registered faint magnetic interference, identical to that found in blank audio tape. The sample jar disappeared from evidence within 48 hours. It was never logged as missing. Today, Mirror Lake is a restricted area. No fishing, no night access, no recording equipment allowed within 100 yards of the shore. Still, hikers sometimes report hearing a faint clicking sound near the waterline, like a reel turning against empty tape. Some say if you play white noise near the lake at dusk, you can hear breathing layered beneath it, as though the air itself is remembering. The county archive lists the Stillwater case as lost file number 072 incomplete. But on the index card where that number should be, there's only a timestamp, 7:03 p.m. Subscribe for the next story and tell us what you think the lake remembered. We're still listening.